Well, hello and welcome to Excel 2016, which is the spreadsheet course that we've got for Office 2016. Now, if you're not familiar with what a spreadsheet actually is, what a spreadsheet is designed to do is to crunch numbers. And really what it does is give you a great opportunity to arrange numbers, do some calculations, do some organization, do some charts, do some lookups, do some things like that. All of that we're going to cover in this course. Now, this particular course is the basics or introduction to Microsoft Excel. And what we're going to be doing is getting familiar with the overall layout of Excel, the different components that are available, and we're going to create our very first spreadsheet. Now, as we go into the intermediate and the advanced courses, we're going to be discussing a lot more detail about functions and formulas and pivot tables, and we're even going to talk about some of the ways you can use Excel for other than numbers. It's important to know that while it is a number crunching, accountants love it, there are other ways to use it that can be very valuable. And we'll talk some things about education and some other things there. So anyway, the best way to get us started is to really put everybody on the same page. When we're talking about Microsoft Excel, there are lots of components to the window, and I'm going to be referencing them as we go through this course. So I want to take some time and start going over the different components, where they are, what they do, and give us a real good introduction to the interface that we're going to be working with as we go through this Microsoft Excel course. So if we start, let's take a look at what we've got here. Now, the first thing you'll notice is it is the entire window, and that's because I've got it set that way. And what I'm going to do is start in the upper left-hand corner, and I'm going to work my way across, and then I'm going to work my way down so that you can see all the different components that are available in my window for Microsoft Excel. If you've used other Microsoft products, if you use Microsoft Word, or if you've used PowerPoint, or if you've used Outlook, some of these things are going to be familiar to you, but I want to make sure I discuss how they're different with Excel. If this is your first experience with a Microsoft Office product, fantastic, welcome to the family. But you'll notice that a lot of the things that you see here can also apply to Word, they can apply to Access, they can apply to all of the Office suite of products. What Microsoft has done is kind of made things consistent across all of their interfaces. Okay, so if we start in the upper left-hand corner, you see there are some icons listed up here. This is what's called the Quick Launch Toolbar. Microsoft has given us a way to put sort of quick buttons, snap controls that we have access to do certain things without having to go through a series of steps to get there. And the first one that you see there, it looks like a 3.5-inch floppy. And if you don't know what a 3.5-inch floppy is, you're dating yourself, just letting you know. I jest. But really what it means is save. It has become the international or the accepted industry standard when you want to save the file that you're working on or save the worksheet that you're dealing with. You simply press the floppy disk icon, and that means that you're saving it. The one right next to it, I'm going to tell you, is the most important thing you're going to know about any Microsoft product. That's an arrow that kind of goes, in your case, back that way. That is the undo function. And what that allows is whatever step you just did, if you did it in error, if you want to go back to where you started from and kind of erase or undo what you just did, that's exactly what that does. That's why it's called the undo function or the undo tool. There are some others that are here. The one right next to it is called the redo, which goes the other direction. That means if you did undo a step and realize, you know what, I kind of like it, I can redo it and apply it again. It doesn't mean I can keep applying it. It just means I go back a step, I go forward a step. And if I click on this icon here, this gives me a drop-down list where I can add function to this Quick Launch Toolbar. I'm not going to go over it right now. We're not going to go over the controls. I just wanted to point out that this particular default that we're looking at here for Excel 2016 is the way it starts with the save, the undo, and the redo. We can add to it later, and we'll see how we do that in the intermediate and advanced courses. So moving along, the next area that I want to point out is this right here. And this is actually the name of the document. What Microsoft does is when you open a spreadsheet, it always puts a title at the top of the window. And the reason for that is we may have multiple windows open at the same time, and they may all look very similar. But what that does at the top is tells me a couple of things. It tells me, A, whether it's been saved before or not. When I open a brand new spreadsheet, which this is not, this is a spreadsheet that I've saved at least once before. Hopefully I didn't just do that in 2 seconds. But when I create a brand new worksheet, what it does is it creates what's called Worksheet 1. It's a default, it's a standard, it's the way that a blank worksheet will start. The first time that you save that worksheet, it gives it a name, and then every time you open that worksheet after that, it puts that name there at the top. So you can tell, like I said, that it's been saved at least once before. Can it tell you how many times? No. Can it tell me if it was saved as a different name? No. All I know is that it was saved at one point. Now over here on the right-hand side, I have some other controls. Now these controls work the connection to my online account. Office 2016 integrates very well with Microsoft's online Office accounts or online storage called OneDrive. And what I've done is I've actually logged into my OneDrive account. And what that means is everywhere that I go, when I log in or I use a Microsoft Office product, as long as I log into that OneDrive, I get my same files. What's nice about that is, in this particular situation, I was at home, I created this spreadsheet, I saved it to my OneDrive, I came here, started taping, and I pull it up just like it was when it was at home. And that's what this is right here where you see my name. I'm actually Joshua Schulfer, yes, that's me. So I've logged into the system and it's letting me know that that is my account that I'm logged in as. The next one over here is actually controls for this area right here. Now, we haven't talked about it yet, but this is called the ribbon. So if I click on this control, I've got three things that I can do. One, I can auto hide the ribbon. I can set it so that by default, if I'm not using the ribbon, it goes away. And then when I roll my mouse over it, it pops back up. And I roll my mouse off, it disappears, and then it rolls it back up. The next one down means that it shows the tabs, which means it shows these areas right up here, which are called tabs. And then when I select one of those, the ribbon will pop up. And then when I stop using it, it'll go away, and then I have it to pop up. Or I can show tabs and commands, which means I'm basically showing the ribbon at all times, and that's the way it's set up like this. It's going to be your preference. I strongly recommend when you're starting out, leave it the way that it is. I want that ribbon there at all times. And the reason is I can see the commands, I can kind of search for them, and as we start using them, you'll see that I get tooltips and assistance from Word if I have them open. Now beyond that, I have three additional controls here. And you see as I roll my mouse over them, they change color, indicating that there's a big square or a button that I can press. The one that looks like a staple is what's called minimize. Now what minimize means is I'm looking at a window. Right now I have it set so that it fills up the entire monitor. That's great. It's the way I like to work on it. However, it doesn't mean that's the way it has to be. I can change this so that that window gets as small as it possibly be. If I get it to go as small as it possibly can be, it's going to basically disappear. So watch what happens when I click it. It disappears. Now I've got a Word document open as well, but it disappeared. Well, where did it go? Well, it didn't close, and that's an important thing to remember. When I minimize a document, I'm not actually closing that document. All that I'm doing, like I said, is making it as small as possible. Well, if I roll down here and scroll down, you'll notice that I have a little icon for Microsoft Excel, and it's a little green one. And if I roll my mouse over it, it pops up a couple of windows. I happen to have two windows open right now, two instances of Microsoft Excel open. One of them, which is a document we were looking at, and one of them is a document that we're going to be creating later on in the introductory course. So if I want to bring that back, all I have to do is to roll my mouse over it, happens to be this one, and when I roll my mouse over it, previews it. If I were to roll my mouse off of it, it would disappear, or switch to the other one. See how I roll my mouse over it, it preview it? I can't just leave it. I actually have to click on it to select that particular document, and it'll bring it back up. It's important to understand that while Microsoft Excel is an application, the window that I'm looking at is actually a document within Microsoft Excel. And that gets me to the X right over here. The X means I'm closing this window. If I close this window, I'm closing this document, which is great. Does that mean that Excel closes? Well, that depends. If this is the only window that I have open, in other words, this is the only file that is open for Microsoft Excel, then yes, it will close and quit Microsoft Excel. Windows is doing that for us automatically. However, in this case, if I have two windows open, in other words, I have two documents open, and I hit the X for one of them, all it does is close that window. The other one stays there. The other one is still Microsoft Excel running. So I wanted to point that out to you. The X closes the window, but if you close the window and it's the last document open, yeah, then Excel will shut down. Well, that brings us to the other one. And what the other one is what's called restore or maximize. That button will change over time. Right now, I'm in a state called maximized, which means it's as large as it actually can be. If I tap this button, you notice what it looks like. It's got two images over each other. That means I'm going to go to restore mode. What restore means is it takes it back to its size that it was before it was maximized. So the last time I looked at this, I had set it this way, and then I clicked the maximize button. Now where's the maximize button? Well, notice how this icon here is now changed. Instead of having two sheets of paper labeled over each other, meaning go to restore, now it's got one, and that is go to maximize. So if I click on that, I've maximized that particular document. So again, those controls, again, are Windows controls. They are focused for Microsoft Windows. Any application that you run in Microsoft Windows works exactly the same way. So not only do Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Access, and Outlook do it that way, but also any other application you run on your machine will have an X, a restore maximize, and a minimize button there as well. Now just below it, you'll see the word share. Because I have this document saved in my OneCloud, I have the opportunity to share this document with other people. And the way that Microsoft Excel does this is it stores a copy on my internet file, and it will send a link to that particular person. I designate I'm going to share with this email address. And when I do that, I can designate whether I want to allow them to edit it or not. When I send it, when they click on it, it opens it up in a web version of Microsoft Excel and allows them to edit that document. One of the advances in 2016, the new things that have come out, if you're familiar with 2015 or 365 or 13, the older versions, is when you're doing that, now we have live preview. So if you do have this shared and other people are actually updating the document, their changes will appear in the document you're working on. Now, of course, it's just like anything else. It has a confirmation, hey, this has been changed. Do you want to accept it? And you can kind of see that newer versions are being added. Again, that's a nice feature that allows me to share that documentation. Now, just below that, we start getting into the actual tool sets that we have. And like I mentioned, this area here is called a ribbon. The ribbon is the collection of controls that I actually have. And just above that, we have a series of words, file, home, insert, page layout, formulas. These are what are called tabs. Each tab has an associated ribbon associated with it. So if I click on page layout, for example, I still have a ribbon. The difference is the controls on that ribbon are very different. So what we're going to be talking about a lot through this course is all of the different controls or all the different tools that I have available to me as I'm looking at each of the individual ribbons, because they all do something different and they all have a different impact on the spreadsheet that I'm actually working on. So each one of these gives us controls. Well, what does each one of those tabs do? Like I said, I want to make sure we're all on the same page. I want to cover each one of these specifically. The first one is File. Now, File is also known as the Backstage tab. When the ribbon first came out, I believe it was in 2007, Office 2007, they called this the Backstage. And you didn't even have a file. It was just a little icon that you had to press on, the Microsoft logo. And this is where you get all of the file commands, all the file controls, where you can save it, where you can share it, where you can save as, where you can print it, where you can publish it. It's also where I can adjust the settings for Microsoft Excel as a whole. I can change the account settings, I can change the preferences, I can even change the custom tool sets that are available on my ribbons for each of the tabs. Now we're going to talk a lot more about this when we start saving and printing, but for right now, I want to go back to what I was looking at before. I don't have a button to go back to home. What I do have is a back arrow. You think about your Internet Explorer, any of your web browsers. To get back, I hit the back arrow. It's exactly what Microsoft's built in here. So it takes me back to the area that I have. Now when I click on Home, because I'm going to go from left to right, using me from left to right on these options here, these tabs, I want to make sure I cover the way that ribbons are structured. The ribbon is structured so that, as we said, we have a tab. I have all of my controls, but the controls are arranged in what are called groups. And if I look at my Home tab, you'll notice that I have a clipboard group, I have a font group, I have an alignment group, a number group, a style group, a cell group, and an editing group. So within each one of those, there are different controls that are available. The clipboard group is where I'm going to start talking about the clipboard. What the clipboard is a virtual storage area for information. We're going to see that I can actually copy information or I can cut information out and put it back somewhere else within the Excel document. Well, in between that, I need to hold that information somewhere. Think of it like I create a little rubber stamp that I can put down virtually. Well, that's what the clipboard is. So what we see here is we see our cut commands, our copy commands, our paste commands, which we're going to go through and use. And I'll show you why the clipboard becomes very important as we move forward. The next set of controls in the font group is all of the controls about the characters or the text that is inside the Excel spreadsheet. And when I opened this course up, I said that it's all about crunching numbers, which it is, but I can also enter text. And if I enter text, I need the ability to make that text look a little bit differently. I don't want to just have, machine text where it all looks the same and I can't do anything with it. I want the ability to make it bold. I want to be able to italicize it, underline it, change the size of it. Because we're going to also see that I can create labels. I can create headers and footers. I can create all kinds of things so that when I do print this document, it's more than just numbers. It's actually got some visual appeal. Because remember, visual appeal, we're visual people. It helps us understand the data if we have those words around it to make a better understanding of what we're looking at. I do want to point out while we're talking about font that there's this little icon in the bottom right-hand corner. Well, what that does is it actually allows me to open up and see even more controls for that group. What Microsoft has actually done is they've said, okay, the controls you see here, the tools that you see in this group are the ones that are most commonly used. They're all of the controls that we use probably 70, 80, 90% of the time when we're working with text. Now, there are other controls that you can do to text, but what Excel has done is it's gone ahead and put them in a dialog box. So you can see this dialog box comes up and it says, I'm on the font tab here. I can change the font, the size, the character, the style of it. I have some effects to it, colors and underlines and things like that. And when I hit cancel, it just closes and goes away. It's just a different way of interacting with the font group. The alignment group is all about the way the text or the numbers look inside each of these squares that you see in my document. We're going to see a little bit later that Excel is focused on grids. So each cell is what we're going to be referring to as a space inside of Excel. And I can arrange lots of information. So not only can I say, how does that text or number work in the cell, I can also manipulate the way cells interact with each other. Do I want to take two cells and make them one? Do I want to take one cell and turn them into two? All of those controls are in the alignment group. You'll also see that I can tap on that and it opens up that dialog box again. Now, if I look at this dialog box, and if you're observant, you'll notice something. You'll notice that the font tab is right here. And yes, we're not actually opening up a different dialog box. All that we're doing is we're opening up the same dialog box, but we're selecting a different tab. Which means if I'm here and I've selected the alignment tab, I don't have to close it, go over here, select the icon to bring up the dialog box again. I can simply go font. There's my controls again. So that dialog box is the same for the majority of these groups, but what it does is it selects the appropriate tab within that dialog box. Okay, number. We talked about the fact that font is the way that characters or letters work inside Excel. What numbers does is allows me to change the format of the numbers that are on this sheet. And you can see here that I've got some options. I've got dollars, I've got percents, I've got decimals, I've got commas, and we're going to cover what all of those mean. But when I'm talking about the way that numbers look on my page, it's the number group on the Home tab that allows me to manipulate that and make it look good. The next area is styles. Now, styles is a collection of formats. Microsoft Excel has the ability to predefine sort of what the color is, what the borders are, what the font looks like, what the shading is, so that I as a user can quickly go, I like that, make it look like that, instead of having to apply each of those controls separately. So we're going to be talking a little bit about Excel's in the styles in their intermediate section. We'll talk about how they get created, how do I use them. I can even create my own. So again, that's where the styles is. You'll also see that I've got some other controls we'll talk about, again, as we go through the courses. The next group is the cells. Now we have a grid here, right? We have a bunch of squares. What if I need to move some squares around or take an entire column and move it over and insert a new one or insert new rows? All of those controls are right here. And we will be using those as we go through this course because one of the key things about Excel is we don't want to just use the default sizes because the things inside of that cell may not fit. So we'll go through all of that as we go through the course. And then of course, editing. Editing is real simple changes to the cells. I can sort, I can filter, I can group, I can find. I've got some simple formulas that are available here as well. So that's the Home tab. And again, the Home tab is where we're going to do most of our work, which is why it's called the Home tab, because most of the controls you use on a regular basis are right there. When you open up Excel, that's where it goes to. The next tab that we have is Insert. And Insert allows me to insert objects or insert things into my spreadsheet. But what's interesting is it's not just things like I want to put a picture, which is an outside object, and put it in there. I can insert functionality. I can insert a chart. I can insert what's called a spark line. I can insert a filter. I can insert a header and footer. I can insert word art. So it's just where I can go through and do all of the inserting into the worksheet that I'm working on.